In the first thing I wanted to touch on today was the story that the cash ISA tax-free limit could be reduced at the next budget from 20k to 10 grand a year. Just give me an overview about what this actually means, because I think what lots of people think is, they've got money sat in a bank account, they've already been taxed on it. Why do people use cash ISAs? Do they need to be aware of kind of other tax implications on any cash they have in other accounts?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on your tax status. Everybody has their own individual tax status, basic rate, non-taxpayer, higher rate tax. So if you're in interest of any account outside of ISA, you are taxed on interest. It's as simple as that. What an ISA allows you to do is to save that money without paying any interest on it. Hence why there's a limit on it, because otherwise rich people would just chuck 150 to 200 grand a year into this stuff and not pay any tax on that growth. Now, I think it's an incredibly poorly thought out idea, because it's not going to encourage people to necessarily invest within the UK, which is certainly the noise that I'm hearing is that that's what it's designed to do, to encourage people to invest in UK companies. That's not going to happen. If you look at social media as a starting point, the vast majority of creators, when they talk about investing, will not talk about investing within the UK. So if it's encouraging these people that aren't going to take financial advice, that are going to do it themselves to try and invest more, they will probably pick a FTSE all year or look at the S&P 500 index. That's the reality of it. It's not going to encourage those people that have money in cash to all of a sudden think, oh, I'm going to chuck some money in the stock market. I think it could be potentially a good move with the right level of education and support and information released with that. That hasn't happened. I think it's just clutching at straws, to be honest with you, and it's not going to encourage people to invest. Like the US have got a massive investment culture. We are certainly lacking that and falling behind that in the UK. That needs to change. I think it will change over a period of time, but I think this is absolute shambles of a movement. I don't agree with that. I think it's the wrong thing to do.
And are there any other any products out there that are, tax-free wrappers for savings? Because obviously we've got the cash ISA for cash. There seems to be quite a lot of talk around actually holding cash in a stocks and shares ISA, which if that limit remains the same, hold it in a trading 212 stocks and shares ISA. I think it's still paying out above 4% interest, which is better than you get from most high yield savings accounts. Any other products that people should be aware of? I've heard people talk about lifetime ISAs. Obviously, the rules on those are a bit different.
Yeah, lifetime ISAs are a great solution as well. There's qualifying criteria for that. You're limited to £4 grand a year, but then you can get a £1,000 government bonus on top of that, which is superb. There are various national savings accounts which are also tax-free. So premium bonds, for example, if you're looking at big numbers, your pension's always going to be the most tax-efficient way to put your money aside. If you then use a financial advisor, you could look at something like an investment bond. The tax-free accounts are getting less and less and less for a reason. The government needs to raise revenue. They need money coming into the coffers to be able to support certainly what I think is a failing economy. That's not going to change overnight.
Is it actually going to impact that many people though? Because me being a cynic, I'm thinking if you are able to take advantage of a 20 grand a year tax-free amount you can put into ISAs, chances are you're a relatively high earner, or you have that ability to put that money aside, i.e. you don't need it now. These people, should these people actually be investing anyway? Because if they've got that amount of cash that they can lose right now, does that mean that actually it should be invested and working harder for them? And are we actually doing what Labour kind of want to do, which is not necessarily penalise rich people, but actually try and encourage more people to put their money to work? Because obviously having it in cash accounts being eaten by inflation, and obviously the other big thing that Labour are trying to deal with at this budget is going to be the massive pension bill. So actually, do you think that while the policy itself in what we've seen isn't actually the right way to go and needs quite a lot of work, it actually is trying to incentivize the right kind of things? It just needs more substance to it.
Yeah, 100%. I just don't think it's particularly well thought out. I'll be interested to see who's actually given the advice and support of these decisions, because the vast majority of people in the UK can't afford to put 20 grand into an ISA. Like, it is going to be the towards the wealthier end of the spectrum that do that. A lot of those people will probably invest already anyway.
Mm.
Now, if that is part of, say, your emergency fund, and you can no longer put your 20k in there, and there's loopholes that they'll just use investment platforms, I think that's dangerous, because the reality is those platforms are aware of this. They will offer really great rates to get people to come in. And banks and those kind of platforms benefit from inertia, people not renewing their ISAs every year. I can always remember when I worked in banking that your ISA rate drops off a cliff after 12 months deliberately. And the banks then use that money and lend it out at a much higher rate. Platforms are doing exactly the same. The vast majority of people don't renew that rate. Now, if you're then putting that money into an investment platform and you are then getting bombarded with, why did you invest in stocks and shares ISA? Why did you put money into this? Why did you put money into that? Why did you open a trading account? Why did you try doing this? That becomes a very, very dangerous game. And those companies will not want to encourage you to do that because it's more profitable for them. Now, there's rights and wrongs in that, but these are regulated companies as well. It's not the answer to what they're trying to do to encourage people to invest. Now, I've got a pretty strong opinion on this, that actually what we should be offering is some government-backed investment funds that offer a real degree of security to get people started, or better tax incentives. So it could be like the lifetime ISA, for example. It could be, well, if you've got a household income under X amount and you invest the money, we're going to match that. We're going to double that. We're going to give you some tax relief on top of that. That would go a lot further than encourage people to invest. Would they then invest in the UK? Very, very difficult to say, because I don't think the UK economy deserves a lot of attention in terms of the investment at the moment, because the US and world markets historically have always been much better. I think right now it's in high interest rates environment. UK and Europe do particularly well, but will that continue? You and I both know it goes in cycles. It's not going to encourage people to invest, and it's not going to have the big impact that they think it will.
And if you are a wealthier saver and you're trying to keep cash aside, are we actually going to see them just utilizing other loopholes, such as not trying to put it in high yield savings accounts? Because my assumption would be, if you put it into an everyday savings account with a really low interest rate, you're not going to be earning that much interest on it anyway, so that's going to reduce your tax bill. So all you're going to do is mean that people's cash gets hit even further by inflation.
That's exactly that. I couldn't sum that up that any better. I think that's exactly what's going to happen. It'll just put pressure on people to try and find alternative solutions, and some of those solutions will make them financially worse off.
Well, let's wait and see what happens. But I think they're using the media as a bit of a litmus test, and this has not done well.
I've heard that a lot, and actually, that was like yesterday. I was having a conversation with a few other creators, and the government will categorically deny that they do that. You and I both know that that's happens for a reason. Like, it's a bit of a test and see what happens, see if this works. This has been on the agenda for a while, as of the pension reform. Mm-hmm. There's no smoke without fire. That has to come from somewhere, right?
The thing that I have seen quite a lot of interest in, and probably has done a little bit better in the media than the government were expecting, which now I'm thinking might lend a bit more credibility to this actually coming out in November, is an income tax cut, but a national insurance increase. So what I've seen is a 2% cut to income tax, but a 2% increase in national insurance. Now, from the offset, it sounds like that's staying the same, but obviously that's not quite how it works. If you're a PAYE's employee, the levels of which you pay both come in at different rates. So can you just give us a bit of an insight into what that actually is going to mean for somebody's pay packet? Are they going to end up with the same amount of money at the end of each month, or will there be slight discrepancies?
Well, it's dead simple. Just to distill it down to what it's trying to do is trying to raise revenue for the government. Like, the reality of it is that is not a tax cut. That is national insurance. Ultimately, is a tax. So it's like you take from one hand and then they're also kind of trying to say, no, we're adding it on this side, but that's not the case at all. Ultimately, it means that they're going to raise revenue. It potentially means less in your pocket, depending on where you fall in the boundaries and where that all lands. If you look at what they did with employers' national insurance contributions, I know people that have been made redundant because of that. Companies will deny it officially, but behind closed doors, they're having conversations with their employees to say, look, these national insurance rises have had a big impact on us as a business. It's a lot more expensive to run a workforce of 200-300 people. We're going to have to make some cuts. And those cuts are going to come from redundancies, or it'll mean price increases for the consumer. It has a big knock-on impact. And like, the frustrating thing for me is revenue has to come from somewhere. They're going back on a lot of the promises that they kind of originally introduced, originally said they'd follow through. That's happened with every government. It's kind of, I think one of the important things to try and do is, where you can, is take control of your own finances and your own financial future. Like, you cannot control this stuff. It'll change again for the next time a government comes in. It'll change again. It'll change again. I was just sat like having a bit of a daydream earlier on. I think, where does this tax end? Like, we've had 40% tax. We've got 45% tax. Will it be 50% tax by the time next 10 or 15 years? Who knows? I think the whole system needs to shake up.
If you're a basic rate taxpayer, my understanding of this is limited, but you pay national insurance much earlier than you start paying income tax, don't you? So we're actually going to see this hitting and it caps out as well, doesn't it? So are we actually going to see, and we don't know the ins and outs of this yet, but do you actually see it hitting lower income workers harder because you start paying national insurance that much earlier?
It's impossible to say, but I think if it is a blanket reform and a blanket change, that rates are going to go up. It'll hit everybody. It's as simple as that. Like, it has to, and I think it hits those lower income families and households and individuals a lot harder, because every pound counts. Every month, like, you've got coming in, and some people in some incredibly difficult positions where tiny little increases in tax make a massive difference. Gary Stevenson bangs on about a wealth tax. Like, is that a realistic alternative? Yes, absolutely. But the reality of it is, the people at the side that are the ones that are going to be affected by that. I think the frustrating part for me is Labour historically have been for the working man. That's pretty far from where they are now and who they're targeting. Like, they're targeting a lot of the kind of the middle income, but even the middle income families and the lower income families now are finding it hard. Financially, cost of living crisis, that's a term that's been coined for a reason. Like, inflation is just nuts. Like, the headline rate is not the same as what you'd be paying individually. Like, look how much your supermarket shopping's gone up, look how much your petrol goes up. This stuff real. And then tax rises on top of that has a real negative impact for a lot of people and makes things really difficult.
But to play devil's advocate for a second, the national insurance hit is also going to hit landlords and pensioners. So I would suppose the justification from the government would be, we are giving the income tax break to those working people. And okay, granted, there might be a little bit of discrepancy and we might find that actually they have worked that out. So let's say workers end up at a zero change. We are going to see that hit pensioners and landlords, which, if a Labour government is for the working person, you'd kind of argue that they're the sort of demographics that they should be going for. Do you think that is going to actually have the required or the desired effect that the government want, which is more landlords are paying more NI, more pensioners are paying more NI, or are we just going to, we'll see people just tweak their strategies and get back to where they were previously?
It's a hard one to answer, Kez, but I think, like, if you're in a position where you've got that income coming in, you'll probably be able to afford some kind of tax advice or some financial advice to tweak those strategies. Yes, so you just kind of find a way of skirting around it anyway. I think national insurance for landlords is a very challenging thing to bring in, because there are a lot of landlords that rely on that income. But actually, it's not the landlords and the control of those properties, it's the big multinationals that own these like tower blocks of flats and all of these buildings. And the big companies that are land banking that are forcing property prices up. Yes, do you know what? There's probably not a lot of sympathy for the lower income families and think, well, landlords are going to get hit because these guys can't afford to get on the property ladder in the first place. So there's very little sympathy for them. It's hard. Like, I know plenty of clients that I looked after that are just disposing of properties. Like, I've had enough, doesn't work, get rid of it, starting to get too expensive, getting harder and harder to be a professional landlord. And I guess the housing supply And what happens after that? This could be very, very big. Like if all of a sudden everybody just like, I've had enough and start selling houses, there's a massive supply of houses then available to buy. What's the knock-on effect of that?
My other slight concern with this is if they raise national insurance, which is traditionally for healthcare, state benefits, pensions, does that then mean that Labour are going to struggle to make any kind of adjustments to something like the triple lock, which is causing massive increases in government spending? Because if people don't understand, I get this a lot on TikTok, which is I've paid into this, it's my money. It's like, that's not how the state pension works. Yeah. So your working people paying national insurance are funding the current state pensioners. It's not a sovereign wealth fund. We didn't sell our oil and gas and create a sovereign wealth fund like the Norwegians did. It is literally money being paid out by working people now to fund pensioners. But if they increase national insurance, where it's essentially a social contract between citizens and the state, does it then make it very difficult for the government to tweak, even if they made triple lock a mean across, the three metrics? You can't do that because you said there should be more money in the pot for this very use. Do you think that's going to make it difficult if they're trying to do anything about state pension reform?
I think state pension reform's got to happen full stop. It's become unsustainable long term. Like, gone are the days of where a state pension you can sustain a reasonable standard of living. You can't do that anymore. So that means the private sector and private provision for pensions and wealth has got to increase. I genuinely believe auto enrollment has played a big part in that. That's been brought in for a reason at a very early stage. Now, by the time I get a state pension at the age of 45 now, it's not going to exist in the form that it currently is because it's unsustainable. People are living longer, people are retiring later. It's a very, very expensive thing for the government to run. There's a massive amount of misunderstanding around it, like you said, like your national insurance contributions pay for the pensioners of today. Now, if there are less people working because there's older people and they're not paying national insurance, in simple terms, that tells you that that's unsustainable because you're having to sustain more people with less contributions coming in, and that just doesn't work. Look at it from like just a simple profit perspective. You're running a scheme that won't be making any profit. It's very difficult. The state pension age will go up, might become means tested, it might change. I think the whole triple lock thing is always on the agenda. It's a hot topic of conversation, but so far it almost feels like political suicide if any kind of political party tries to adjust or change that because it causes such an uproar. And let's be honest, the people that this affects will make their feelings known with votes. It's a popularity contest. That's what it is. Let's be honest. It's who's going to be in next term around when the next election comes around. And I think changing things like the triple lock and pension provision is a very dangerous game, and it's potentially political suicide. The other part of it is like they're there anyway. Like, they have not done a great job since they've come in, and it's the uncertainty and the noise and the whispers behind closed doors about this is going to happen, that's going to happen. Like, you and I both know that some of this stuff could just be quashed straight away with a well-timed press release. Actually, we're not going to do this, we're not going to do that. Quiet and down because people are making some decisions and big decisions on information that might not be correct.
I think the other thing I was in a position yesterday where I was speaking to a managing director of a building society, and we're talking about the issues with trying to balance the books of the national deficit. And I think there's a couple of big issues, which is obviously reform are very much about stop the boats. These people are making your lives worse. They're taking so much money out of the system. And I've previously posted that in the grand scheme of things, it's very little. It barely touches the size. We have a $1 trillion, £1 trillion a year budget. And the thing that's actually making the biggest increase to that is interest rates going up and the gilt yields going up, meaning we're having to pay more and more debt on. And unfortunately, this is another narrative that a lot of people don't like, which is, why are we not using this money on foreign aid and on asylum seekers and hotels and bring these people over? Why are we not helping British people? Well, you had quite a lot of help during COVID, and that needs paying back. And it's not very popular to say to British people, you've already had the money. We obviously saw a huge wealth transfer during that period, but this stuff needs paying back. And I don't quite know how the Conservatives have managed to wash their hands of such immense borrowing at such low interest rates with no feasible plan to repay it. But Brits, you've already had it, you know, and these people coming across on small boats are costing you so little that it doesn't even. I was reading that it's something like a 25 basis point movement in the UK gilt yield means that it adds 8 billion a year, something like that. And you're going, I don't know what we've had in changes this year already, but it's more than that.
Yeah, those are big numbers. I think a lot of it's a distraction technique. Like shift the focus over there so you can't see what I'm doing over here. Like it's smoke and mirrors. It's like that's how this stuff works. Because you can actually make changes while everybody's distracted with this other thing. Like, oh, blame it on the foreigners, but then you've got the rich corporates and the wealthy individuals on the other side of that rubbing their hands and saying, oh yes, fantastic, you're focusing on that, and look how much money we're making.
Yeah.
Like you look at like the stuff with like, I mean, I've used the example of Michelle Mone in the House of Lords. Like, look at the trouble that she's got into, and just a total disregard for how much money that's come out of our pockets has just gone, and she'll just liquidate the company and then the money's gone.
But there's still 38 billion of COVID fraud unaccounted for. And we're worried about an asylum debt of, I think, 5 to 6 billion a year.
Yeah, like I think it needs to be a better system. Don't get me wrong, right? It needs to be a better system. It needs to be better controlled, and we need to understand who is actually coming into our borders and do these people genuinely need help. Yeah. I, for one, have absolutely no problem with somebody who's actually a legitimate asylum seeker who's fled a country and picked their family up and taken them to the UK because they want a better life because their family might not survive the next 2 or 3 weeks. If it was the other way around and they kicked off in this country, I'd be in a car and I'd be straight across doing exactly the same thing in reverse. And anybody would. Like, that's the reality. But it's when it's groups of people that are unpoliced or unmanaged, you know very little about them, that's the dangerous. And I think certainly the media and the government played into that. Like, actually, it's everybody. This is the problem. And like you say, Reform and Farage are kind of really pointing finger heavily at that. That's not the issue. Like you said, look at those numbers that you just talked about. That's like a drop in the ocean.
I think that's a problem, which is there is a narrative that the economic justification is enough, and actually a lot of it is just racism, you know, and racist exists, but that is not a good enough argument. There are legitimate arguments to be made on every single side about what to do about the asylum issue in the UK post-Brexit, which has obviously had a massive impact as well. But the economic, this is not causing the economic downfall of the UK in the way that many people want to believe. And when people say, you know, but it's not just that, it's the amount we spend on healthcare, we're translating signs, we're doing all this, it's like, it's still so little in the grand scheme of things when you've got whole councils going bankrupt because they've been underfunded for 15 years. You've got no residential property development happening because, you know, big corporates have bought land up and just sitting on it, which is increasing your price. So, you know, and you've got all these other things that are happening, but it seems to be, I can point the finger at that and that will be the I wave a magic wand, they go away and life is rosy. And it's not like that at all. There's so many other things. But to go on to something that's maybe a little bit jollier, you know, we've AI companies going absolutely ballistic right now. They've had a phenomenal week. NVIDIA, first company to be valued at a 5 trillion market cap. Although lots of people on the other side now saying, is this AI bubble as big as it can get? Is it about to burst? How are you advising your clients? Because I'm assuming, as we know, you know, the S&P 500 is essentially the movement of 7 or 8 stocks, and they're driving this growth. how are you advising clients if they are worried that we're at the peak? If there might be a bit of a market collapse in the AI space?
What's like, it's a really simple question I ask the clients. What's your time frame? Like, how long is it before you need this money? If it's 20 years, like, don't worry about it. I can guarantee when I sit down with the client and they've got a 20-year time frame, I can guarantee there's going to be market crashes in those 20 years. You don't get 20 years of growth. That's just how the markets work. Like, these things go up and go down as long as you've got a consistent approach and you've got the time frame and the right level of risk that you're comfortable with. Sit tight, don't do anything. It's as simple as that. Like, I think the whole AI, is it an AI bubble? I don't know whether it is, because there's still so much further that this can go. And AI is becoming an integral part of our lives more and more, and we're still at the very, very early stages of it. Like, I'm a big believer in it, and I'm spending a lot of time using it, researching it, looking at it. The impact it can have for a lot of industries is absolutely massive. The more people I talk to, there's very different beliefs about what that could become. Some people believe that actually what it will do is we can all get a better quality of life because some of the heavy lifting is done in the background, and we can spend more time with your kids. You can work less hours. You can maybe even end up with a universal level of income that everybody has. Who knows? It's, if you're in it for the long haul, like you invest in, it's just a case of sit tight, ride it out, keep going. You'll get good years, you get bad years. As long as the general direction of travel is on an upward kind of trend, and we've got a goal that we're working towards, don't do anything. If you want to go and buy some individual stocks, then crack on, give it a go. But the bulk of my clients' wealth is invested in funds for a reason. It's invested in funds that are managed in well-run companies for exactly that reason, because I can, with a certain degree of predictability, give them some security of the growth that they're going to get for the future.
I think that's an important point, which is the diversification that people have, and I think maybe, as we see a lot in the influencer space, buy an S&P 500, market index, and it's diversified. Well, it might not be as diversified as people would like it to be. Still, and different fund managers are going to have different weightings, and the US is very, very tech heavy. So I'm seeing a lot of people move towards, a FTSE all world, with a bit more diversification across countries and geographies, as well as sectors. Spoke briefly earlier about the FTSE 100 in this country, which obviously tends to be more of a dividend paying market. And, I've spoken to a lot of people who are like, which stock do I buy next? And it's like, if you don't know, go the fund route, because at least you're going to have that level of diversification. But I think maybe something, if they do want to go that little bit deeper into their analysis of their own portfolio, what I'm seeing is people realizing that they're invested in 3 or 4 different funds and they think they're diversified, and actually 25% of their holdings are in Microsoft because there's a lot of overlap. Is that a challenge you're seeing happening with your clients as well, that there's a lot of overlap between these funds, that they think they're diversified but actually they might not quite be as diversified as their risk tolerance suggests?
Yeah, absolutely. I think diversification is important, right? To spread your kind of, not all your eggs in one basket. But even a FTSE all world would be 60% invested within in the US, so you've still got 60% US exposure. I think it goes back to the goals. Like, what do you want to achieve? Like, I think a lot of financial advice is, we can get you an extra bit of a return on this, and come to me and I can save you a little bit of money here. Like, my philosophy on this stuff is, get really clear on the strategy that the client needs to deliver the outcome that they want, and work out the return that they need to get. And then if you can work out your client, say, for example, you need to get a return of 5% to be retired in 10 years' time. If I can, with some degree of certainty, get them 6% return fairly consistently, we're above target. We've still got a little bit of fat in that. And that's building up a bit of a buffer for those years when it's a little bit leaner, or when it does go down, and you'll still be on track. Like, it's a race to the bottom if you start trying to outcompete each other on returns. And I don't do that with clients deliberately, because exactly that. And my view is, I'll work out what you need down to the pound, and I'll build a plan that's going to work to deliver that, with market crashes built in, inflation built in. We'll know what the asset allocation is, and make it really clear and robust that it can succeed in a number of different circumstances.
I think that's been a journey that I've been on, which actually, particularly when you start taking more control over your own finances, you don't have to be better than everyone else. You just need to find your groove, get your plan, and just work to that. Because, you know, my risk tolerance is going to be different from yours, would be different from someone else's. My daily expenditure is going to be different. The amount I'm happy as saving or spending is going to be very different. And what I want to do and retire might be very, very different. You know, my retirement might be all world cruises, which is going to require significantly more money than someone who's got a paid off house who just wants to live there, you know, for on 10 grand a year. And I think more people need to stop looking at percentage increase and results and year on year growth and go, is this going to equip me with everything I need once I hit those age goals, and my financial goals going to match that? And I think particularly on the likes of TikTok and YouTube, we're not quite going, is it matching your goals? You don't have to outperform everyone, you don't have to be Warren Buffett, it just needs to suit you.
Oh, like absolutely. And a lot of the time, like even clients through the process that I go through still don't know what those goals are. And you can't tell me what your life's going to look like in 15 years time. You can't tell me what your life's going to look like in 2 weeks time, Kez. So how can you forecast a 30-year time frame? You can just have let's paint a best case scenario of where you're going to get to and figure out with certain parameters how to get you there and what that looks like, and review it every year. The planning part is much more important than the advice, in my opinion. And I think as an industry and a profession, there isn't enough of the planning stuff. It can be very transactional at times. And actually, if you're going to be doing the transactional stuff, you might as well do it yourself on a lot of occasions, because the value is just not there. If you don't understand that, then you'd engage a financial advisor. And go back to what we said earlier about like stocks and stuff. Like, I've got a really simple philosophy about this. It's pick a stock. And if you can't pick a stock, pick a fund. If you can't pick a fund, pick a financial advisor. Simple as that. And you will not go wrong in the vast majority of scenarios if that's the process that you follow. Because if you're just sticking your finger and guessing, you're gambling with potentially your life savings and your future.
I think it's also about controlling the controllables, because you're quite right. You don't know what's going to happen in 2 weeks, and it's why a lot of people kind of around my age who are first-time buyers and the likes and are trying to reduce their monthly mortgage costs and stuff like that. It's like, overpay as much as you can afford to. If you've got £2,000 a month, get a mortgage for 1,600 and just keep paying £2,000, because that is going to make whatever happens at the end of your working life significantly easier without that mortgage burden. And I've got was speaking to people who've got a 40-year mortgage, which means they're gonna it will take them to 71. Now, they would probably not say, but are probably hopeful, grandparents die, parents die, there's some inheritance comes through, you can start paying off. But if that doesn't happen, you know, if you're controlling the controllables and that doesn't happen, or they've had to spend all their money on, you know, end of life care and things like that, and there's nothing left for you, you're left until you work into 71. And I think my advice on who's just trying to get a handle on their own personal finances is going, control whatever you can control, you know, with within your means, within your budget. I think 50, 30, 20 is a really good, easy structure where you can, you know, plug the numbers in. You can't control tax, you can't control national insurance, or the bits you can control are so minor. But what you can control is, am I living in a part of the country that's so expensive that I need to take a mortgage out? It's going to take me to a potential worst case scenario of working till I'm 75. And if that's not what I want to do, let me control that to make that different. And it's a really hard thing to tell people, which is actually, you know, you can't have everything. You know, you might not be able to retire at 50 and pay your house, you know, but control what you can while you can. And then hopefully if the things that in a best case scenario do happen, it's a bonus. It's like my wife and I were speaking to a financial advisor when they were changing the pension scheme. And I said to the pension advisor, I said, whatever you're going to tell me, do it without the state pension. Because if it's not there, fine. But if it is there, it's a bonus.
Yeah, absolutely. And I've literally been with clients this morning with exactly the same thing. They're in a very fortunate position that they've got a comfortable retirement. They retired 2 weeks ago. State pension's going to kick in for them in 7 years' time. That's an extra £1,800 a month. Now, they've already got multiple sources of income. They can probably get by in under £3,000 a month. That's a very fortunate position for them to be in. But at the same time, they've had the reliance on that state pension. They knew that that's going to come at some point. take it off the table. Like, it might not be there for us. If it is, it's a bonus. If it's not, great. That's a big reality check for a lot of people as well, because all of a sudden your 150, 200 pound a month pension contributions or whatever it is you're doing come into focus very quickly, and you'll realize how far you are behind and what you need to do. But you can't kick that can down the road. And I think, like, as a system, we need to do a lot better in getting people invested earlier in life and making the right financial decisions. Like, my personal view on it is, I think there should be very little option when it comes to your pensions with work until you get to your 40s and 50s. It should be really simple. And if it's really simple, and I've done this for 20 years and I got the data that sits behind it, and anybody can do the research, high risk funds over a longer period of time will significantly outperform some of the other stuff. Significantly, hundreds of thousands of pounds of difference. Now, if you're not aware of that till you're in your 40s and you've taken a different approach for 20 years of your working life, that's a lot of money you've left on the table.
Yeah.
It's tough, because from a financial advice perspective, are you going to spend time explaining to somebody around that when it's not profitable for you? Because I've got my own business to run. I to do what's right for my family first. 100% I do. Then it's my clients. Then it's whatever comes after that. Am I going to sit down with somebody who says, I just need to understand what level of risk take for your workplace scheme? Yeah, I can do that for you. It needs to be part of a bigger advice picture. That advice fee is going to be, let's call it £1,000. They're not going to pay that. Can't go to the HR department and say, what do you think about this pension? They can't go to the scheme provider and say, what's function of a year? And it just goes round in circles. And 90% of the time they'll say, I'm not going to do high risk, I'm not going to do low risk, I'm going to be a balanced investor. And I see it all the time, unless the client is reasonably switched on. As soon as I see the pension scheme, I can say, are you in a balanced fund? Yeah. Are you in the default fund? Yeah. Like, it's criminal how bad some of these funds perform. They should not exist. It's impacting people's financial future massively. That's why the social media space and this whole influencer space is incredibly powerful, because it's educating people to be able to go out and make those decisions with information that's been kept by my profession and my industry for a very long time. And the event that I was at yesterday was a financial influencer event, and that event was so different to a financial advice event. Everybody from the people that are just coming into this space, starting to build their following, to the ones with millions of followers, all talking, all collaborating, all networking with each other, all coming up with different opportunities to work together. If you put a room of that with financial advisors and you had the heavy hitters, all the heavy hitters would be over one side, all the newbies would be on the one side. Be very little intermingling.
Yeah.
And there's still a massive divide between the so-called finfluencer space and financial advisors. Like a lot of financial advisors hate that space. It's here to stay. In fact, it's getting bigger and it's getting better consistently over a period of time.
But how many blue suits and white shirts were there at the influencer event? Because that's the
none. It's actually, the thing is, okay, the reality is it's not blue suits, it's grey suits. It's the grey suit brigade.
Oh no! Oh,
like
a t-shirt.
I was like the financial advice events. Whenever I've got to conferences, sometimes I'll be taking them up myself. All the financial conferences I've been to, let's be honest, it's male, pale, and stale. That's the nature of the professional industry. It's changing very, very slowly. It's going to take a long time before it does properly. It's all guys in grey suits. I'd stand in the room, like, have a cup of coffee, look around, and I'd be like, "Oh my god, everybody's either got a grey or a black suit." And I refuse to have one. I'm not going to wear one. I'll wear a navy blue suit, or I'll wear a royal blue suit, and I don't want to be another number in that crowd.
See, I once made the mistake of going to an advisor event when I was doing some PR for a wealth platform. And I wore the blue gilet with a white shirt, and I fitted in remarkably well.
But I was in the city yesterday at an event, and when we came out of the event, they're everywhere.
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that, right? Because literally this week I was looking online, I was like, "Oh, I quite like those gilets," and then I'm like, "No, hang on a minute, I'm just going full finance bro mode." No, and I put the brakes on. I'm not going to get one. But you never know. And if I do, the next time I see you, I'm going to have one on.
You have to. It's the tie and gilet look, which is
it's interesting, isn't it?
Arsehole. Like you just absolutely. Although I had a really interesting thing. I think it was the chief investment officer of Morningstar was saying how the Apple Watch had democratized those types of events, because once upon a time it was who had the biggest watch on. your Rolex or Breitling or whatever. But now everyone's got an Apple Watch. You don't know if someone's super senior or it kind of it added that level of anonymity into the space. The problem is though, I then went to one event and I saw a guy with the Rolex on his left hand and the Apple Watch on his right, and I went, no, he's the peak wanker.
Yeah, this is it. Absolutely. But yeah, you're right. Like, and there's still so much status in that world, isn't there? Like, it's status and competition, and the old golden gecko greed is good for a lot of these people. There's people make phenomenal careers out of it. Like, I get it, but like, it's a real interesting world once you start getting into like the city and how that all works, and it's very, very different to how people think, and it's nowhere near as exciting as it's made out in films.
Oh no, and I think it's not Wolf of Wall Street. It really isn't. But I think what people really don't understand, and it kind of linking back to their pensions, is they have so much more power than they think they do. Because it's money talks, and it's money in volume. Even if you're at the beginning of your career and you've got 10,000 in your workplace pension, there are millions of people with 10,000. And if they all decide to move in a particular direction, this is where we saw ESG really take off in 2021, 2022. If they all decide to move in a direction, it moves the market. Yeah. And I think what people don't maybe fully internalizing how much power their money has, whether that is a conscious consumer and shopping in a particular. I don't know, my wife was saying how she didn't agree with a position that BlackRock were taking with some of the business that they were doing in the Middle East, and BlackRock own the largest share of Marks and Spencer's, so I'm making a conscious decision not to shop there anymore. Well, it's only one person, but if one person removes their spending from there and puts it somewhere else, and then another person, it's that movement in numbers. And I think we need to do a better job of number one, understanding what we want our money to do for us. If you want to invest in oil and gas and mining and whatever, you go and do it. It's within your power as well. But if we start talking about what we actually want our money to do and not to do, and start being more active and more deliberate in our actions, even if that's shopping at a particular supermarket, buying more local, buying more secondhand, right up to where my pension's invested, all of a sudden this is where we start to see big market movement over time. I just want more people to know that you have more power than you probably think you do.
Oh yeah, huge. But like you said, even what goes into your pension on a consistent basis, you've got control over the funds, the platform. You can have conversations with your employer around, well, actually, I want to be able to have access to salary sacrifice in this scheme. I want to be in a pension provider that's got lower fees. Like, you can do that at a individual and a group level. Like, even with relatively small employers, like even some of the small employers now that I've worked with over the years are taking a better interest in this stuff to get better financial outcomes for their employees, because it makes a big difference.
And they know that if they're looking after their employees now for the long term, they'll look after them. It's a conscious business decision they're making, but the hope is it benefits everyone.
Like, and I get it, right? Like, some businesses want the cheap option because like margins are tight, so you'll take an off-the-shelf one and you plug it in, but you could still improve that over a period of time. And not just have the off-the-shelf one, and not wait like 3 or 4 years. And maybe you do get somebody and have conversations with your team about financial well-being, all this kind of stuff, or you get apps plugged into your financial well-being or your well-being software, your well-being systems. Like, it all counts, it all makes a big difference. And I think information technology for a lot of people overloads them, but the whole space is really interesting how that's going to evolve, certainly over the next 3 to 4 years, as AI plays an even bigger role in that. There's AI advisors out there now. I saw a post on LinkedIn of a lady who's developed an AI advisor software that has actually passed the diploma qualification that I have to take to become a financial advisor, and passed, not with 100%, by the way, but passed every single exam at high grades, of course. Now, you can program a AI to do probably a more consistent approach to what an individual would be, because your behavior, your mood, your mindset has such an impact on how you show up for your clients.
The only thing I would temper that with is that there's been a lot of data looking at when robo-advisors were very popular, around 2018, 2020, so they started to be implemented. A lot of the survey data came back that said that despite their results, people still wanted to speak to a human being because there is a massive emotional driver behind our money. And that is just something you lose with the computer or you lose with the AI advisor. And I think I can't remember the exact stats. I'll need to refresh my memory, but something like 72% of people, prefer speaking to an advisor, even if they don't produce the same returns. And it's like, I think there is the emotional and human element when it comes to money in our futures that a lot of people probably just don't want. However, why a financial advisor like yourself isn't looking at what the AI advisors are doing if they're able to produce consistency, and then you're offering the emotional bit, that's where we get the human AI element, which is where you're going to see really good IFAs thrive and less good ones, fall down.
Yeah, like 100%. I think you can, like, I use it every day and it complements so much of what I do. It does a lot of my heavy lifting, and that the amount of workload that can take is only going to get bigger because I'll be able to pass more stuff across it, obviously in a secure environment, make sure everything's protected. But there'll be more and more of it. I would quite happily look at one of these AI advisors and plug it into what I do and be able to say and offer an alternative to some clients that maybe can't afford financial advice, that maybe haven't got a £3,000 advice fee, but maybe have got like the 20 grand that we were talking about, the ISA allowance, but want some real guidance and support about what to do. Like, that is uneconomical for me to do that, but they could plug themselves into a system that would get a very, not identical, of course, a similar outcome advice wise, not the behavioral stuff, not the planning side of things. It's really interesting. I think the industry needs to change and evolve. We're so far behind other industries, and we always have been. And I think that's a good thing because it means we're not jumping into technology and reform and change until it's well thought out and planned. But sometimes it does slow us down.